Can you please explain the importance of India's soon to be commissioned INS Vikrant aircraft carrier against aggressors, and how important aircraft carriers are in a war? Why do so few countries possess them? Well, very few countries possess aircraft carriers because they are incredibly expensive pieces of hardware. Uh, an aircraft carrier like the INS Vikrant would cost approximately $3 billion on the lower scale, or $5 to $6 billion on the higher scale. Right. The American aircraft carriers all cost individually more than $10 billion each. That's an incredibly high amount of money. So most countries can't afford to have that. Secondly, when you spend so much money on a single ship, you are concentrating a lot of your lethality, of your navy's lethality and investment in one single ship. Right. So if you have an aircraft carrier, which can, let's say, the Indian aircraft carriers can carry about 30, 35, maybe 40 fighter planes, and it is a significant investment you've done. So it is a huge, very lucrative target for the enemies. And so that's why aircraft carriers, very few countries want to have them, because you can, for the price of, let's say, one aircraft carrier, which is, let's say on average $5 billion, you could have 10 or 15 destroyers, warships. A destroyer, a warship, on average, a medium sized one, would cost between 200 to $300 million. So for the price tag of $5 billion, you could have 25 such warships, which can be used in a variety of ways, and you can disperse them throughout your territory instead of having just one ship in one place. So for the same money, you can get much more lethality and much more distributed lethality. Similarly, if you have missile boats, which typically cost 30 to $50 million, you can have much more, many more missile boats instead of one aircraft carrier. So you can distribute your lethality much more. If you have a submarine that costs, let's say, on the lower scale, $100 million, you could acquire 50 submarines, invisible, deadly submarines, for the price of a single aircraft carrier. So the cost benefit analysis is not quite good when it comes to aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers are very nice to see. They are very prestigious ships. If you have an aircraft carrier in your navy, it gives you a great amount of prestige. But the aircraft carrier, to tell you the truth, is obsolete. I don't understand India's obsession, the Indian navy's obsession with aircraft carriers. When you have a war with a well armed adversary, you actually have to hide your aircraft carrier. Why is it that in 1971 India had to hide the aircraft carrier in Vishakhapatnam instead of I don't know if it was 71 or 65. One of these two wars, India had to essentially hide their craft carrier because it was vulnerable to submarines and whatnot. So it is very difficult to defend a ship like that. You need a whole ring of other ships around it, which will provide the defense. And so that costs additional money. So let's say the US, when it wants to defend an aircraft carrier, it has about 10 ships around it, which includes destroyers, which includes submarines as well, right? So it is very hard to defend an aircraft carrier, and it's a simple mathematical thing. You can overwhelm any defense when you have more missiles than the defense can cater for. So so if you see my discussion with Dr. Edward Luttwak on this channel, he tells very clearly, he's one of the greatest geopolitical analysts in the world today, a great guy. So he said very clearly that the aircraft carrier was the capital ship of every navy. Every navy has a capital ship, a great ship, the greatest of all ships. So it used to be the capital ship in 1945, in the Second World War. In the 21st century, the real capital ship of a navy is the submarine. Submarines are invisible and they are deadly. They are very hard to detect. They can do far more damage with torpedoes, with missiles, with cruise missiles, with ballistic missiles, etc., than any aircraft carrier can do. So the real capital ship that India needs to invest in is the submarine. I just don't understand why we are still in the 20th century mindset. And I know this is not going to be popular. Lots of people are going to disagree with me. Well, Feel free to disagree. This is how I see it. It is all based on the logic of strategy, on the patterns that we are seeing, that we have witnessed in naval warfare over centuries. There is always a certain ship in a certain era that is the capital ship. Right now, it is the submarine. The aircraft carrier is a big, huge target, slow moving target, very hard to defend. The submarine is the invisible predator that slinks around under unseen, undetected. That is the deadliest ship that India needs to invest in. So we are certainly investing in a few submarines. We should have many more than what we have today. So I would say that please stop building more aircraft carriers. Use the money to acquire other ships, especially submarines. We need to distribute our lethality instead of concentrating our lethality. Right. So I will go into the concept of distributed lethality in one of the future episodes because it needs to be explained properly. But the importance of aircraft carriers is it's these are not very important anymore. They actually have to be hidden in a real conflict. Aircraft carriers can be used to intimidate small opponents, like that's what the US does. It is to project power and show that we are the biggest fish in the sea. But when there is a real conflict between two equal powers, the aircraft carriers are going to be the first casualties of war. So I think India should stop investing in this incredibly expensive kind of ship and use the money to acquire more and more submarines.